Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy Mark.
Hey, Frank. We got quite the response from last week's episode where we broke down roughly half of the mind-blowing career of Fugazi. I can't wait to jump back in. But just in case we've got some new listeners, why don't you tell them what our little program's about?
That's right, Mark. This is the podcast where we recommend albums for each other and we review them. We also have a wide variety of musical discussions, so be sure to check us out on our Instagram and YouTube for additional comments that will leave you wanting more of this musical goodness and, of course, random nonsense. And on YouTube, you could also see our awesome jawlines. Right there and there. We welcome comments. And if you want us to check out a record, let us know. And while you're at it, subscribe, give us a review, rate us, let us know what you think of the show. And this way we'll get connected. So, Mark, I say this to you. How are you, my man?
Frank, the world outside is going crazy. The world's literally going crazy outside. So I'm really stoked to be finishing up this amazing catalog of music that Fugazi has provided for us. It's we talked last week about how we felt like this was therapy. I think we got that therapy in the right time because
totally, yeah.
Let's wrap up this Fugazi spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. The absolute heaviness. I totally agree with you on that. And this is the second part of our band spotlight on Fugazi. And last week we touched base on 13 songs, Repeater, Steady Diet of Nothing, and In on the Kill Taker. So here we are for part two, and hopefully we don't butcher names as often as we did last time. Listen, we get excited. I get it. It's not Mackaye, it's Mackaye. I mispronounced Pachotto. I said Pachotto. And listen, I'm Italian, and I butcher Italian names. My mom can't even say my full name correctly, so it happens, right, Mark?
Hey, look, I just have a regular white trash name, so my mom's never had that problem. But we do, Mackaye's, Mackaye's, Maku's, Makkah's. You guys know who we're talking about at this point.
Totally.
Again, we're not professional journalists. We're just two guys who really love talking about music. And Frank, would you do the honors and tell us a little bit about Red Medicine?
Absolutely. So we're going to jump into the next record, which is Red Medicine. That is June 12th, 1995 on the release, Red Medicine again. So here we get an expansion on more experimental styles such as noise punk, psychedelic moments, and even dub. The intent here was to create a more ambient sound with vast depth. The band tried alternate tunings on their guitars, and even the clarinet makes an appearance as well. This was produced by the band again, and they were gaining confidence with the in-studio experimentation. So, Mark, why don't you take us in about your thoughts on Red Medicine?
Yeah, so this was a challenging album for me to review. I really wasn't sure how to go about to address it. So I'm just going to kind of go song by song, even though that's not usually this format for a feature like this.
Sure.
But it's such a big album. There's so much happening that I didn't want to lose anything. The harsh, over-distorted intro that doesn't really fit with the rest of the first track really threw me off balance right off the gate. The repeating of Lockheed, while it works for the song, it really didn't. It works rhythmically with the song. It didn't connect to the rest of the lyrics for me. The "Do You Like Me," which also gets repeated a lot, and that's part of Piccato's style. Actually, both of them like to do that. The heavy repetition of words, with the sound. It's part of their style, part of their sound. In this particular case, those two phrases, I just was never able to put them together in a way that it worked as a cohesive song for me. So it was really tough. And it put me in this really tough spot because the balance I love about Fugazi, it just wasn't there. And we're just one track in. It really it jarred me really. Bed for the Scraping pulled me back though, with that familiar slightly more muscular guitar sound. But I'm sorry, this album is really hard for me.
Yeah, it seems that it's leaving you conflicted. I could tell.
It is, because it does things I really love, but it also does things that I just didn't get. Bed for the Scraping really reminded me of that Fugazi that I loved, and was heading in that familiar, similar direction, while still being different enough to be unique for its own album. But I was still kind of terrified from the opening that something else was coming to hit me kind of like out of left field. Latest Disgrace grooves, but feels uneventful in an otherwise dynamic catalog. That groove that they're known for kind of lulling you into. It just felt a little flat for them. Only for Birthday Pony to have another disjointed intro, to what felt like an otherwise pretty straightforward, reminiscent of the early days song.
Yeah.
It's really weird. And then you get this awesome song like Forensic Scene, on the other hand, that feels like Fugazi, and they're return to that powerful rhythm section. And the full sound that they built on Steady Diet of Nothing. It ebbs and flows sonically and emotionally. It's just a very powerful track. Combination Lock follows. It's the first. I think this might be the only album with two instrumentals.
I believe you're right on that. Yes, sir.
But this one feels. Usually their instrumentals have emotion to them, that you can feel that there was an idea when they created these rhythms and these patterns. And this one just felt like they jammed and it filled up enough space on the record. And I really hate to say that about Fugazi. I hate the idea of there being a filler track, but that's really what this felt like to me, which is a bummer coming off the heels of such a great song as Forensic Scene.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm taken back right now.
No, it's all right, man.
And I hate nitpicking like this, like at something like this, because it doesn't have to have that emotional weight of the other instrumentals. It just felt so short to me. Fell Destroyed.
Yeah.
Felt
interesting track.
Like a stream of consciousness song that we get out of Kato from time to time, and it just kind of never came together for me. Felt like maybe the instrumental before was supposed to be an intro, but it kind of worked as an instrumental, so they kind of stretched it out. It really just got stuck with me. And then you get By You, and I believe that's Lely's first song that he sings.
That is correct.
And I like what he did lyrically. I didn't mind his vocal performance, but the song, it just took a little too long and really just didn't get anywhere. Then it was over. Despite it did like this really slow build, and then it went somewhere, and then it had this like super long outro. Excuse me, I just spit all over my hands.
It's all right.
So it just, it's just feeling really disjointed, and and it's really weird with Fugazi albums. They feel cohesive. They feel, even we talked about 13 songs being the 2 EPs, and how you can really feel each EP as its own nugget. And with Red Medicine, I was really having a hard time with that. Then we get Versions being the second instrumental.
Yep.
The infamous clarinet, and of course this is where the jazz and the EDM bit come out, and people give them that kind of credit. But unlike Combination Lock, it feels like it works. It feels like they had a plan for it, and it has that depth and is able to have some expression and emotion beyond just being a jam. Um, Target really lulls you right into itself with that groove and the repetitive drums. When Pachito, I'm going to say his name 400 times wrong. I'm sorry. You guys know what I'm trying to do. Reading is very difficult for me out loud. Nails you lyrically. Some of his best work on the record. Rallying against kind of the absurdity of the industry. Unfortunately, Back to Base comes in just too heavy off the heels of Target. There wasn't that flow that you expect, that kind of give and take. It's just kind of a very abrupt heaviness, which really, it was just too, like, I hate to call Fugazi muscular. I never feel like the muscular guitar. That doesn't really go with them. But this song and the next one really really seem to do that. Down City is the next one, excuse me.
Yeah.
We get some powerful grooves in there and some powerful lyrics, but it just doesn't seem to come together the way I want it to. Excuse me. I'm mixing up where I'm reading, folks. I'm trying here. Long Distance Runner is probably my third favorite track on the album.
Right.
And that's where we get much more powerful lyrics. The guitars are restrained, and the rhythm section really just grooves, and like it feels more like you're back in a Fugazi record. I think people will say, I don't know. I will say this feels like their most experimental record to me, that they were trying to step as far out of the box as they could. And some of it really worked, and some of it just missed the mark for me. Some of my favorite tracks on this album, though, Forensic Scene, Target, and Long Distance Runner. So,
yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting too. I love that we're able to do these back to back, because we both have different perspectives. Because I see an album one way, you see the album another way, and it's beautiful, kind of how we both see it and the interpretation. So for me, I absolutely love this album, right? I love it. I think you get the dirty and the grimy side of the band, and you also get that experimental. This could be then that turning point to those more experimental tracks. Do you like me? Yes, there's some confusion in the beginning as to what's this all about, but to me it sounds like you got an indie rock vibe going on. I love Guy's vocals. I think they're spot on here. The word placement. I like the Lockheed Martin part. I think that was interesting placement. The 90s sounding bed for scraping is also interesting. It's much more than that. I think this song has a reliance on the main riff as opposed to just chords. The song has that all over the place type feel, but it comes back and it works nicely. But then you get some new ideas, and I think Birthday Pony shows some of that. And there's that piano organ intro, which they're really trying to, I think, place and discover. And then you have an absolute highlight for me, which is one of my all-time favorite songs in general, in Forensic Scene. I love the absolute clean guitar sound. I love the steady beat, the almost creepy vibe. Pachoto's, he just nails it lyrically. The unclipped, unclean, this Forensic Scene's all played out. The defense rests, and no shit Sherlock mouth talk con job. I love that line. So this is as perfect as this song gets to me personally. There are two instrumentals here, but I figured they're welcomed after just having albums where you already know what they could do. So it's like, all right, well, so what can you do next to raise that bar a little bit? Fell Destroyed is another track I think that shows the growth. I mean, yes, it does seem like a stream of consciousness, but I don't even know how to classify the song. Lally's By You it's a rousing grunge number. It expands on the alternate tunings, because that's one of the tracks that they do the alternate tunings on. Target showcases those jangly guitars and amps up with a really killer riff. A Long Distance Runner is yet another great way to end the album, and it made me feel complete. So I felt it was a great balance as to what the band has to offer, even with the two instrumental tracks. My favorite tracks: Forensic Scene, Target, Do You Like Me, Bed for Scraping, Fell Destroyed. So it's interesting how we have two different perspectives on an album that has so much going on.
It was interesting. I was talking earlier about just all the craziness in this world. And, Frank and I have been listening to these records nonstop for basically the last 2 weeks. And really focusing in on the 3 that we're going to do today, this week. I can't help but feel a little bit, we talk about Fugazi's albums having not themes. I don't think any of them are theme albums by any stretch of the imagination, but they all have a particular feel, a painter's blue period or something like that. I think each record really sits on its own. So the title for this for me, Red Medicine, and the way the album can feel a little disjointed, reminds me a little bit of people taking medication and the starts and stops and the gaps that you have and the problems. So it was something I'd been trying to formulate words for, and I think they came together while you were talking just now.
Totally.
Here's the crazy thing. I will still listen to this album again and again and again. It's really good record. It's just kind of crazy. It pushes the envelope.
Yeah. So. It's that, I think the way we divided up the albums in these episodes kind of worked, because this is kind of the start of then that last back half of the records where you just get all these cool different types of sounds. And next we got End Hits, Mark, if you want to kind of give us the facts around End Hits.
Yeah, End Hits, April 28th, 1998. There's a rumor that this was released for my 16th birthday 2 days earlier. That's not true. The band did not release this for my birthday. The title did lead to rumors, though, that this was the band's last release. It was actually an inside joke by the band referring to the last track, F/D, as drum hits by Brendan Cantry that occur after the track. And actually, if you listen to F&D and you kind of get to the end there and you kind of hear a little bit of the recording and some of that stuff, you can get it. The trick here is to get the joke, you have to listen to the whole album.
Yeah, totally.
What a concept. It should also be noted that after Red Medicine, the band took an extensive break. I think it was only like 3 years, though, between the records, right?
Right.
So I think most of the records were like 2-year gaps, and then this one was 3.
Yeah.
They wanted a more relaxed approach to recording, giving them more time to experiment. The album took 7 months to record. That's probably the longest any Discord record.
Yeah, probably.
took to record, short of bands starting writing their album before anyone knew who they were and then running into a studio to record it.
Yeah.
The band worked on microphone placement, the use of electronic drums, synthesizers, and the practice of drum layering. And I think you'll hear us talk a little bit about some of that sound engineering as we get into this. Frank, why don't you give it a start on End Hits?
Yeah, so this album for me was the one I was most excited about revisiting and giving a thorough listen to, because I really didn't before. And to me, it's quite possibly the underappreciated album in the catalog of Fugazi. Why is that? Well, maybe it's could be, some say it's the most experimental and it kept pushing that boundary. Maybe it's just an overall context thing where it naturally gets overlooked because everything else is so incredible. Whatever the case is, this album, it's great. I absolutely love it. Break is a great way to start off the record. You get a stellar bass line with palm muted guitars and Mackaye's distorted yelling of break in the background. I really like that. Place position gets mathy, and that's a hard thing to pull off, especially when musically some are wired to write a certain way. Like this guy, I couldn't pull that stuff off. So I thought that was a cool song. No Surprise is like a drowning 90s grunge tune where we're treated to both Picciotto and Mackaye on vocals, which I love. I thought I could hear that on alt radio in the 90s. Five Corporation sounds like what the indie rock bands were trying to do in the early 2000s. And again, we're seeing like the lasting impression Fugazi leaves on music, even if they don't even realize they're doing it, which I think is so cool. Closed Captioned is another great example of how this band could tone it down, get loud, show their musicianship all in one track. Floating Boy and Pink Frosty have a psychedelic feel to it too. So you're really now getting into some interesting boundaries here. They find way to really give us like this this amazing closure too on these records that's really incredible, and it'll leave you at the end to be like, wow, how did they do that? And that's, you know, what I always ask myself at the end of listening to this album. So I could see where some people could think that there's an emptiness on this album, maybe due to the increased amount of experimentation. Maybe that could equate to an incomplete feeling. But I mean, overall, Mark, I think it's a fantastic record. It's one that gets overlooked in their catalog. Favorite tracks: place position, excuse me, Five Corporations, Floating Boy, Pink Frosty, F&D, stands for Frank DiMaria, by the way. So Mark, why don't you take us through your thoughts on End Hits?
Absolutely. You know, End Hits delivers on so many fronts for me. The band is able to be aggressive on the record without overpowering any of the other members of the band. Break and Place Position are a perfect example of this, and quite the pair to open the album. Recap Modati, I think I said that right.
I think you did.
Showcases Lally's second appearance on lead vocals, as we just learned above. And he slays it. Really great performance. It's a seductive track that builds and builds as you're lulled into this kind of dystopian dreamscape. Fantastic.
I like that.
Fugazi really feels like they're back on the same page here. Even as No Surprise draws out toward the end, while you don't know where it's going, you feel like the band is firmly in control.
Yeah.
Five Corporations fucking rocks. Playing to the band's strengths of rhythm section driven melodies and just lyrical force. Caustic acrostic. I think I said that right.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Caustic. He says it really fast. It's hard to tell what he's actually saying.
Yeah.
Caustic acrostic. Its drive is very reminiscent of Repeater and Margin Walker, and Picado's lyrics and vocals are amazing. Really killer job on that song. Closed caption, we get Mackaye's, I think, best vocal and lyrical performance for me personally in the last two records. Although he is otherwise great on this record, and he sings well in Red Medicine. I really felt like this was his shining moment of the last two albums. Yeah. Anyways, the end jam here works with the song.
Yeah.
We just heard, so it kind of had a bit of like an extended segue that floats kind of seamlessly into Floating Boy. Sorry, I wrote a sentence that was hard for me to read, folks. It floats really into Floating Boy, which seems like it was meant as kind of one of those experimental jams Frank was talking about, with a little bit of that stream of consciousness lyric style that they like to do. And I love the way that it flows into Foreman's Dog. But Foreman's Dog brings you right back. Like it's almost, you're on this cool wavy trip and then it just stops.
Yeah.
But not in a dead way. It doesn't stop the album. It just reverts back to what you're used to, which is really cool. We get one of my favorite instrumentals in their catalog, which is, I'm probably going to say this wrong as well, Arpeggiator. It's probably not a real word, so fuck you guys if I said it wrong. It delivers sonically a rich range of emotions, expressions from aggression to loneliness to anxiety to playfulness, and not in that order. It just really finds a way to express itself and drag the listener in. With a really haunting little melody there. As we hit the final three tracks of the album, Guilford Falls, Pink Frosty, and Frank DiMaria, each stand out on their own beauty, wrapping up a really bold record that stretches the idea of what Fugazi albums can sound like while managing to sound undeniably like Fugazi. I hope that sentence made sense, because What I'm trying to say is that this, to me, I agree with you, is one of the more experimental, but at the same time sounded more like they were in control of the experiment than perhaps on Red Medicine to me. So I really dug this. My favorite tracks, or the first half of the record, is almost completely flawless. The second half of the record is almost just as clean. The whole fucking record rules. Yeah, go listen to this record.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And a side note too, and I should have had this on my notes, but for the instrumental tracks, our arpeggio in guitar playing is where the notes of a chord are played in succession, either ascending or in a descending way, and that's something that I remember learning from guitar teachers and stuff like that. So they kind of took that and I think translated that to an instrumental track, which was really cool. And
that's what he's doing. The little melody is just arpeggios.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's then how that track came to be, and the name stems from the root of that. So I think it's pretty cool.
But listen, I was paying attention in band. That just wasn't something I needed to pay attention to. So,
but great record though. Great record.
Yeah, and I really, for me, I think we could probably, if we're not doing it, so don't ask. We could probably do an episode just on their instrumental stuff.
Oh yeah.
We're going to talk about Instrument Therapy, the documentary. We're not going to cover the soundtrack because you've heard all of it. It's the demos and stuff for Red Medicine.
Yeah. And this album
and this album and probably a little bit of the argument, but I didn't really want to pick through it, but you really could just listen to their stuff instrumentally, and I think it would work as a record.
Yeah, and I could only imagine our conversations of interpreting what the instrumental tracks kind of then meant. I think would be fascinating. And you bring up the documentary. So that was released on March 29th, 99. And we're going to do our quick thoughts real quick on the documentary. So listen, it was interesting. It clocked at a little bit over 2 hours. To me, it was like watching an album of theirs, but in a documentary form, right? You had the gritty, not flashy. It's done by themselves. The band doesn't do that much of the talking as their music and the performances speak for themselves. And you could just tell by listening to the music that you see in this documentary how important it was for each of the members to be in a band with those who felt the same musically. And I think that's a common theme. That's a thread throughout the whole career of the band. Each member is a leader in their own right, and they possess an immense amount of talent that's just off the charts. The late 90s, I think, scene kids were interesting to look at too when they were doing that footage of them standing in line. It's also intriguing to see them talk about how they didn't necessarily like Red Medicine and how the band won't let them slam dance or how just some of the people didn't really know a lot about the band. I don't think it displayed the glory of these other bands that were out there, these flashier bands. But hey, there was a few times where Mackaye was shown with the earnings that they made after the show, and that looked to me to be like a nice chunk of money. So again, their success was there. They just did it in their what was viewed by the masses as an unconventional way. But Mark, the doc was great. What'd you think?
Yeah, listen, this doc rules for two reasons. Reason number one, no Bono. Reason number two, Eddie Vedder didn't know they were making it, so he didn't show up in it either.
Love it.
It's great to see them working on the material. It was great to see how they interacted with people realistically, and how they put, the politics of the band as not just a flag, but stood on their morals and acted on it. Really interesting. And if you're into the band and you don't mind a little kind of art house movie stuff, it's a great watch.
Yeah.
Definitely have a cup of coffee first.
Very cool. And very true.
Not to bore you or anything. I just there's segments where it gets a little long-winded.
Yeah.
And you can, get lulled into that fun little rhythm.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. But it's definitely an interesting watch and a good watch at that. Then so then that was 99. So all of a sudden, October 16th, 2001, here we are with The Argument, which is the band's last release before going on the infinite hiatus in 2003. But they had a first demo that was released in 2014, but that's not really a proper album. So this album, of course, expanded on the art punk sound and incorporated other instruments such as piano and the cello. It's the first album, which is pretty cool, to feature outside musicians. One who is Kathy Wilcox of Bikini Kill, who is Guy Picciotto's wife. So that's interesting. And the writing process for this album really consisted of each member bringing individual riffs and these ideas to the band, and then the band jammed on them and started piecing them together. And the fun fact, the song "Oh" features all three vocalists, Picciotto, Mackaye, and Lally, which is the first time we get that from all three vocalists. So, Mark, take it away with The Argument, man.
Yeah. So this is, as Frank said for End Hits, this was the album I knew the least going into. But I love that it takes the time to set up the mood before getting into the album with that kind of short, mysterious intro, little radio static, a little guitar static, what's coming. And I thought that was really tastefully done. They kept it under a minute. Good job. Now that I've been a dick, they do an amazing job of seamlessly moving between rich guitar tones and distorted tones that come crashing at you, and you feel like there's a siren behind you in the near distance. Full disclosure embodies an eruption of emotional panic and leaves its listeners trying to pull themselves together. From here, the album, I think, can be mistook for kind of low energy as far as Fugazi albums go.
I can see that.
It takes its time to slow down and to quiet their voice. It's like an English teacher. I'm going to talk really low. I don't know why I'm doing it right now. An English teacher saying, I'm going to talk really low so that you have to pay attention to me. And I feel like, if we're talking about an argument, we're talking about the idea that, not that the album's a concept, but that common themes generate it. I think the latter half of this record really is about that, slowing down and really listening to what the other person has to say. It forces you to pay attention to what's being played and what's being said. Subtlety is a fine art, and Life and Limb, and The Kill are proof of this. Both of those songs are subtle. Neither one of them rages, beyond it's necessary. It doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
It's probably the best way to just describe that. Strange Light builds on it, but never gives in to rage until you have to. And then it fades back into this somber cadence that feels natural and cathartic. Only for O to push you back on your heels as X Spectator reverberates as your inner kind of monologue, berating you, only to realize that you're watching the whole thing from outside. The argument itself, the album has swallowed you at this point, and you need to separate yourself from it, because Night Shop feels like you're being trapped into like a dark dream. And the realization of that, the track feels like walking from said dream till you're awake, really suckers you in. The argument as a whole is really beautiful because it leaves so much of itself for the listener to fill in. to draw meaning from. The title track, very much the same. You're coming from that dark, dreamy space into the title track, and it really just kind of forces you back into the world. It's a really interesting album. It's one that's for me, it was very easy to get lost in this record because you have to listen so intently.
Yeah.
I really love, listeners of this show know I'm going to tell you, get a cup of fucking coffee, put on your headphones, listen to this record.
Get lost in it.
You just get lost in it. It's really beautiful. The lyrics are gorgeously written, yet, like I said, they're just open enough for you to attach whatever you really want it to be. I was really surprised how much I loved this record at the end of this.
Yeah. You put it so well too, because a lot of it is left up to the interpretation of how you perceive it, and I think that's a beautiful thing about the lyrics and about the vibe of the music. Some say it's cryptic, but to me and you, it means so many different things, and I love that. I love how it's so open to interpretation. I think of the album, I think of very clean sounds, right? The verses in Cash Out, Life and Limb, The Kill, just again show how the band can tone down without making poor quality tunes. Life and Limb in particular. Whoa, love it. Absolutely love it. I love the Viva, 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 Life and Limb play so nicely. And even though the tempo never picks up, there is a build to the chorus. We went to Violence Doubled. It picks it up even a little bit more. Strange Lights, and Night Shop almost have an indie rock vibe, which again, as I said a little bit ago, that genre is going to really get popular years after this album's release. So it's like Fugazi almost predicts the sounds and the trends that are going to come out before the other bands, the bands jump on it. Again, we have Mackaye and Pachotto really playing off of each other in the guitar, and that chemistry just never goes away. And although toned down and clean sounding, the album is super innovative. It brings in the guests and musicians. It's deep, and listen, if this is the last Fugazi record, I'd be cool with it. I'd want another one, but I'd be cool, but I would also be cool with it. And I read an interview with Pachotto around the time of the record's release that just reiterating that this was the most democratic process they had in releasing this record. A lot of the tunes, again, like I said, came in from jamming, and everyone had input. Of course, you have the Lowley song, the Kill, and Canty on drums really had a massive hand in writing the lyrics for this album. So I adore this. I adore this record a lot. I think it's really great. Favorite tracks: Life and Limb, Cash Out, Strange Light, Night Shop, The Kill. Like you said, like Mark said, put on your headphones, get in a good space, listen to this album. You won't be disappointed. Such a good album.
I got distracted doing this and didn't list my favorite tracks.
Yeah. Well, what are yours?
The same ones, except I also had Full Disclosure. I really love that song. But just so that people at home can't say I didn't do it.
So here we are. We have all the records. We went ahead and did that. And I was thinking, let's do a couple quick top lists. The first one's going to be the top 10 favorite songs after listening to the band for so long for the last 2 weeks. We'll do songs, and then we'll do our album ranking. So Mark, take it away with your top 10 Fugazi songs after listening to them for 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to have a few that we both agree on, but I think we got a nice little mix here. This one, I always say, in no particular order, but exactly in the order I mean them in.
Nice. This
could change by the time I'm done saying it.
Totally.
Because the body of work is so deep that it's hard to pinpoint. And I was thinking about this, and I'll get to listen in a second because you're listening to my podcast, and I'm going to say what I want. I was thinking, right, Frank, if best of albums are basically just somebody going like, hey, these are their 10 best songs, right? We're going to make a best of Fugazi album. A best of Fugazi album would sound so sporadic. It would just be like, what is this stuff just jammed together? It's like, I don't think it would work in that aspect.
You did like 4 of them, first of all, but
right. it's not going to compare to an Aerosmith's greatest hits where you're just,
Yeah.
they're all such deep tracks. So for me, at 10, Forensic Scene.
Love it.
Number 9, Smallpox Champion.
Good tune.
Number 8, Life or Limb.
Love it.
Absolutely love that song.
Love it.
Closed Caption.
Mm.
At 6, Break.
Love it.
Number 5, Exit Only.
Love it.
Number 4, off the +3 for Repeater, it's going to be Song Number 1.
Great track.
Song Number 1. Number 3 is Blueprint. Absolutely love Blueprint. Waiting Room is number 2.
Yeah.
And honestly, that could have been Bulldog Front. It just depends on how I feel. It changes a lot. Number 1 for me is Latin Roots.
Oh, I love that song.
Absolutely love Latin Roots. The groove, chorus. It's just a killer. Frank, what do you got for us?
Love it. And again, by the time I'm reading this, the list could be completely different, and I'm going to probably take some stuff that Mark had and then put it to my new list. But anyway, the list that I had prepared is as follows. Number 10, Bulldog Front, great track. 9 is the song Repeater. I love everything about it. 8, Exit Only, which is one of my favorite openers for an album ever. 7, Bed for Scraping from Red Medicine. I really like that tune. Blueprint, we have at number 6, classic Fugazi song right there. Number 5, Life and Limb. Love it. 4 is Walk-In Syndrome. I think that's such a great tune. 3 is Place Position. 2 is Rend It from In on the Kill Taker, and number 1 is your number 10 is Forensic Scene. I wasn't lying when I said that's one of my all-time favorite songs. I'll put that on, and the wife will be like, "Whoa, what is this?" It's that impactful of a song to me, and so many different levels. Yeah. Absolutely love that tune. So, but hit us next week. Hit us up next week, and we'll have a different list for you. So there you go.
You want to next? You want to do? We'll rank the albums.
Yeah, this is tough. Yeah. It's another one of those things, and I'll go first because you did the songs first. I had to put in. In my mind, I was like, okay, listen, there's going to probably be an album that catches me off guard, and I shuffle it, and put it into my top tier. But I thought before this whole project that I pretty had my list solidified, but I was wrong. So here we go, and I'm going to start off with an unpopular choice, but my bottom album is 13 songs, believe it or not. It's unpopular, so I'm going to get some heat, but I consider it I consider it a release, but not necessarily an album. So I kind of have that always in the back of my head. I know it's the most popular, so I know it's hard to say, especially again with Waiting Room and Bulldog Front. It's a fantastic album, but again, I have the ability to forecast how they're going to be performing in the albums from 13 songs on. So I know what to expect. So I kind of feel comfortable saying that. It's also the one I listen to the least. But yeah, 13 songs is actually at the bottom of my list. 6 is Steady Diet of Nothing. This is one where I thought it would be higher on the list, but one kind of overtook it, which I'll tell you which one did. It's a great album. I think it gets lost maybe with some of the production. That by no means it's bad at all. It's fantastic. But it's just the ones I'm going to mention I like more. 5 is End Hits. This one surprised me how good the record was. You get so many styles on it. There's not a bad song on the record. This could also be changed with the next one. We could swap those out, but right now this is how the list is. But the next one's Argument. I went back and forth, but this one gets the nod. I think because Life and Limb is another one of those tracks that I just absolutely adore. So it was a constant loop that I had on for such a long time, and it's just one of my favorite tunes about how songwriting is developed and stuff like that. So I absolutely love Life and Limb. 3 is Repeater. This is a classic early just Fugazi album. Turnover, Repeater, Merchandise, Blueprint. I don't have to say anymore. Repeater is great. This is the one that really took on a life of its own after I listened to it. That's In on the Kill Taker. This album probably was where Steady Diet of Nothing was. Then I listened to it, and I initially thought it was just going to be an extension of Steady Diet of Nothing, but man, it blew my mind. All songs on here are just unreal. It's loud, it's aggressive. It also progresses their musicality. I love it. Number one, believe it or not, it's Red Medicine. I think it's one of the most balanced of their records. It features my favorite track in Fugazi World, which is Forensic Scene, as I mentioned before. It's, I think it's the turning of the back half of the catalog that really cemented their sound. We get more Pachotto here, which I'm sure is no surprise by now, but I tend to like his songs more. Nevertheless, I really think this is a flawless album, and I get all my Fugazi kicks out of it, for all the different sounds and styles. So that is my album ranking. Mark, if you want to go ahead and unveil yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in direct confliction with what Frank just said, my least favorite album is Red Medicine.
Yeah, there you go.
You know what? And it speaks to how these albums affect you, where you are, what's going on. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and it wasn't clicking for me.
Yeah.
That said, the rest of this is very tight. Like, I came up with a scoring system.
It's so tough.
We're talking fractions of points apart.
Yeah.
Next, for me, is going to be The Argument. Again, it was one of the albums I was the least familiar with, but I was really, really pleasantly surprised by how amazing that record is, and how enveloping it is.
Yeah.
How you can get yourself into that record. Really impressive. After that, for me, is going to be 13 songs.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it has the hits on it. You can argue, well, it's 2 EPs, whatever, but most people know it is the first record. So there it is for me. Third from the bottom. In on the Kill Taker follows that up. I really enjoyed the beginning of them really starting to experiment and figure out how they wanted to push the envelope. And I think In on the Kill Taker is a great example of that. That said, my next pick is End Hits. End Hits is fantastic. I absolutely love the way that record came together. I love the richness of it, love the tone of it. I love the way they use that open space, that less is more mentality of using silence for what it is as a sound and applying that to that music. And I really feel that they did a great job of that.
Yeah.
Next is Steady Diet of Nothing. This album just really drove home for me what phenomenal musicians and songwriters they were, and how passionate they were about what it is they were saying. And they weren't just saying it for the sake of doing it, that it meant something. It was really, really a fantastic record. Which leaves my number one, Repeater.
There you go.
Yeah, Repeater. I mean, it's just, I said it last week, you really feel the band has come together. They understand what they're doing. This, to me, obviously their first real record, really solidifying that sound. It's fantastic. But to be honest with you, just with the list we did a moment ago, talk to me tomorrow, and I'm sliding 3 or 4 of these around.
It is, and I think I know the answer, but is Repeater the album you give someone who's never heard of Fugazi before?
It's typically 13 songs.
Right.
Because I think there's a higher chance that they've already heard Waiting Room, and I feel like, and I'll get into this in a minute, I feel like if people are comfortable with something, they're more likely to dig deeper into it. So that's why I tend to start with 13 songs.
True.
But know that very quickly Repeater is right behind it, because I'm going like, okay.
Get done with 13 songs so you can listen to Repeater.
You listen to it once? Okay.
Oh man. And listen, it was it wasn't easy trying to rank these albums, and I love our different interpretations of it, and I love how we could chat about it. It's really cool. And after wrapping all this up, I was like, well, what bands nowadays are like Fugazi, and are there any bands that are like them? They've influenced so many, and like Pearl Jam, and I say that just with a little sigh of annoyance, but they say Sunny Day Real Estate has some qualities. There's a band called Jawbox out there, which I know of by name, but not necessarily by songs. Sonic Youth claim to have heavy influences from Fugazi. Those bands are technically more like contemporaries. There's a band called Drive Like G Who that eventually spawned off other bands like Rocket from the Crypt, Orbits, the Night Marchers, and a modern band that sonically I think has a Fugazi flair, which is Hot Snakes. So to me, when I listen to them, I hear that post-hardcore, mature-sounding band that really focuses on musicianship. And I know I say this a lot, but I love that sound, and that's the type of band I'd be in today. Mark, any thoughts on like kind of bands that sound like Fugazi, or are there? Is it just no one's going to really sound like Fugazi at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but I think where I hear Fugazi's influence the most is probably in the traditional hardcore scene. That slower rhythm, the big drums, the grooving bass. I think they had a lot to offer to that group of people, in that they taught them a lot about punk doesn't necessarily have to be loud and fast. That's how I like it. But that's not the only answer. And I think Fugazi, especially when it comes to punk rock, and I don't know that Fugazi strayed away from saying that they were punk. They were certainly more than, right? They were certainly more than a label. And I think anyone who goes, oh no, Fugazi was this one label, can go fucking fly off a bridge. Because there's no one label that can really sum them up and pigeonhole them. You can't. At their roots, right? They had these hardcore punk rock roots, and the sound that they had certainly influenced a lot of the modern hardcore. Remember a few weeks back when we listened to Turnstile. Go back and listen to that record after having spent all this time listening to Fugazi.
Totally.
And I think you're going to hear a bit more of that depth and that influence than maybe you had previously, just not thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that they have a broader impact like that. And what's really cool is that they don't just have a hardcore, or they don't just have a punk rock influence. Their influence is really spread out. It's really it touches a lot more than people want to, not that people want to give them credit for, but than people realize.
Yeah.
And that's, I think ultimately their legacy is that.
Yeah, such a good point. I mean, you could have a band in a totally different musical genre, but they could tell you, hey, listen, we got our influence of experimentation and wanting to be a band by doing this musically and trying to push that boundary by Fugazi, but they could sound nothing like Fugazi. But that influence is crossed over, I think, to many genres. And listen, just wrapping up kind of in my final thoughts, they live that ethos that they set out to be devoted to, from the business practices to the no violence at the shows, the DIY approach. A band could be like, oh, I'm DIY and not be post-hardcore or punk, but where'd they get that from? It was this minimalist philosophy before that was even a thing in people's lives, because you hear parents in particular talk about, oh, minimalist. Well, I mean, there you go. That's an early kind of form of it right there. When I think of music and I think of DIY in particular, I think Fugazi. Their success was merited by the quality, and they were still successful financially too. So yes, they had success. Musically they were intentional and did not want to be a band where anyone could play the songs or B write them. There was no leader, and the band had complete democracy, and they were all just musical geniuses. On a personal note, since the first time I heard many years ago, probably when you gave me those discs back in the day, Mark, Guy Picciotto's voice, I felt connected to him, especially in the early days when we would be in bands, because believe it or not, my voice would come out a little bit higher than I'm talking right now. Yeah. And then I'd like
I didn't hear behind the drums, folks.
Yeah, there you go. And I felt it was a good example of how to properly sing when you have a kind of a vocal tone like that and still have an edge to it. So I always liked it. And yes, you could rip me if you're also saying I favor him because he's Italian, whatever.
Literally nobody had said that, Frank.
No, of course
nobody had brought that up.
No one brought that up. No. But I always liked his vocal tone and how he was able to tone it down and still have an edge. So I always had an affinity there. But listen, every record in this I've enjoyed so much. They're deeply personal to me. Again, if we don't get another album, that's fine. But I sure hope that we do one day. Mark, I mean, it's been a heavy 2 weeks, but man, your final thoughts on what we've done here with Fugazi.
Trying to summarize a body of work like this is a tricky task. Weighing each album on its own merits was hard enough. I welcome anyone to do it, and I don't mean that facetiously. Sit down with these records and get into them. They are intense. But then, of course, you have the legacy of the band, which was an institution, ironically, within their community and their time. So I'd prefer to pose a question. Are you a head, or are you just a body? Or are you a human being? Are you looking for more than entertainment? Are you looking for an emotional connection to the sound that moves you? Fugazi offers that.
Yeah.
Fugazi isn't just, for the weak of heart. They are by no means a starter punk band. They're for humans passionately striving to challenge what music is. And what you can take from it.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what you're willing to give. Listen to Fugazi.
Yeah.
Really listen to Fugazi. And you will be very happy. You will be much, you'll be much better for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best. That's the absolute best way to put it. It's not for the weak of heart. These are heavy laden songs. There's layers to it. They could strike you in so many different ways, and they'll leave you at the end of 2 weeks like the way we are right now, which is tired and exhausted from it, but all in good spirits. Yeah. So it was great, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. So what we have now is we're going to fill you in on our next episode, which is going to be pretty cool. And Mark, we have a fan request, and this comes from Keith. He suggests that we check out the band Rival Sons from Long Beach, California, and their 2019 release, Feral Roots. Now, Mark, I have to be honest, this is one of those bands where I've heard only by name, so I'm really unsure what to expect. What say you?
I'm in the same boat. I know somebody has said this name to me before when I was asking folks for just give me rock and roll.
Yeah.
And that's where this name has come up. I'm pretty excited. We're going to do it as a full episode. We're going to do track by track on this one.
Totally.
For no other reason than Fugazi emotionally put a drain on us in a very positive way. But there's a lot going on in the world, so we thought it'd be, let's do something fun. Let's do, Kevin?
Keith.
My apologies, Keith. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
We do have a fan, by the way, of Kevin, so we do have a Kevin that listens to us.
Oh, hey, what's up, guys? Anyways, so we thought this would be a fun way to break it up. We can't express enough that we hope that this was a good escape for you.
Yeah, totally.
Beyond COVID and what's going on in the world. from Frank and I, we really hope that everyone's being safe out there, please.
Absolutely, guys. And thank you so much for the listens. Again, if it's a good escape for however long we make these episodes, then we have done our job. As Mark always says, drop us a line. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want us to listen to. We'll be more than happy to interact with you. And we really hope that everyone's staying safe out there. Until next time, everyone. See you later.
Bye. Oh, I did it too soon. Bye-bye. I got it that time.